I never believed in fate until the night a stranger grabbed my wrist in a hospital parking lot and demanded to know my real name. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday in late October. My shift at Mercy General had run 3 hours over, typical for the ER during flu season, and I was exhausted in that bone-deep way that makes your vision blur at the edges. I'd just clocked out, still wearing my scrubs with coffee stains on the sleeve, when I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, purposeful. "Wait." A man's voice cut through the darkness. I spun around, my hand already diving into my purse for the pepper spray I kept clipped to the inside pocket. Years of survival instinct don't just disappear because you've got a nursing degree and an apartment with actual locks on the doors. The man who stood 15 feet away wasn't what I expected. Mid-30s, maybe 6'2", wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and even in the dim parking lot lighting, I could see the intensity in his eyes, gray, like storm clouds over the ocean. He held up both hands, palms out, the universal gesture for, "I'm not a threat," but something in his posture suggested he absolutely could be if he wanted to. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice rough but controlled. "I just need to see your neck." "Excuse me?" I took a step back, my fingers closing around the pepper spray canister. "You need to leave. Now." "The tattoo." He moved closer, not threatening exactly, but with an urgency that made my heart hammer against my ribs. "On the back of your neck, the butterfly. Where did you get it?" My free hand flew to my nape instinctively, covering the small tattoo I'd discovered when I was 16. I hadn't gotten it done. It was just there, as far back as I could remember. The counselors at the group home had said it was probably done when I was very young, maybe before I entered the system. I'd learned to keep my hair down to hide it, to avoid questions I couldn't answer. "How do you know about that?" The words came out sharper than I intended. He pulled out his phone, hands moving quickly, then turned the screen toward me. The photograph showed a woman's neck, olive-skinned and elegant, with the exact same tattoo as mine. A small monarch butterfly with its wings spread, each detail identical. The intricate pattern of the wings, the specific placement just below the hairline, the size, everything matched. "Her name was Isabella," he said, and there was something broken in his voice. "She was my wife. Someone killed her 14 months ago, and I need to know how you have her tattoo." The parking lot seemed to tilt. I steadied myself against my car, the metal cold through my scrubs. "I don't understand. I've had this tattoo my whole life. At least, as long as I can remember." "So did she." He stepped closer, and now I could see the dark circles under his eyes, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. This man looked like he hadn't slept properly in over a year. "I need to know your name, your real name, not whatever's on your hospital badge." I glanced down at the ID clipped to my scrubs. Riley Morgan. The name the state gave me when I aged out of foster care at 18, cobbled together from incomplete records and bureaucratic indifference. But before that, there had been other names, other homes, other versions of a childhood I'd spent years trying to forget. "Riley," I said, though it felt like a lie. "Riley Morgan. But that's not the name I was born with. I don't know what that was." His expression shifted, something sharp and almost desperate crossing his features. "Do you remember anything? An orphanage? A facility?" The word hit me like a physical blow. St. Catherine's Home for Children. I hadn't spoken that name aloud in 8 years. Hadn't let myself think about those walls, those locked rooms, the smell of industrial cleaner that never quite masked the underlying scent of fear and desperation. "Yes," I whispered. "St. Catherine's, in Bridgeport. I was there from age 7 until I was 15. The man closed his eyes briefly, his jaw clenching. When he opened them again, there was a fierce determination there that made me take another step back. Isabella was there too, he said, from age 6 to 13. She escaped when she was 13, made it to the city, eventually made it out of the life she'd been forced into. His voice cracked slightly. She spent years trying to find the other girls who'd been there with her, the ones who didn't make it out. My knees went weak. I'd known St. Catherine's was bad. The locked dormitories, the special visitors who came late at night, the girls who disappeared and never came back. But I'd survived by keeping my head down, by being invisible, by never asking questions. When I finally escaped at 15, I'd run and never looked back. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name is Mason Wolfe," he said, and the name clicked something in my memory. Newspaper headlines, whispered rumors, the kind of name that carried weight in certain circles. Mason Wolfe, they said, controlled half the underground in the northeastern corridor. Mason Wolfe was dangerous, connected, untouchable. And I think you might be able to help me find the people who killed my wife. I should have gotten in my car and driven away, should have called security, filed a police report, done any of the sensible things a normal person would do when confronted by a man who was essentially admitting to being a mob boss in a hospital parking lot at midnight. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'll meet you. Somewhere public. Tomorrow. But I'm not promising anything." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. He pulled out a business card, expensive stock, simple black lettering, and held it out. "There's a coffee shop on 7th and Madison. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I took the card, our fingers briefly touching. His hands were warm, calloused, the hands of someone who'd done more than just sign papers and make phone calls. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I've been looking for months," he said quietly. "Anyone who might have known Isabella at St. Catherine's. It took me this long to track down enough records to get names, and most of those names led nowhere. Dead ends, fake identities, women who disappeared into the system or worse. But 3 weeks ago, I found a photograph from the orphanage records, a group photo from 2006. You were in it, you and Isabella, standing next to each other in the back row. Both of you had your hair up. Both of you had the butterfly." He showed me another photo on his phone. It was grainy, black and white, taken with an old camera. But there we were, 2 girls among maybe 20 others, standing in front of St. Catherine's main building. I remembered that day. They'd made us dress up, smile for the camera, some kind of inspection or fundraising photo opportunity. I'd been 12. The girl next to me had been maybe 14 or 15, with long dark hair and eyes that looked too old for her face. Isabella. "I don't remember her," I said, though it felt like another lie. There was something about that face, something familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "I don't remember much from those years. I think I tried not to." "Tomorrow," Mason said. "We'll talk tomorrow. There are things you need to know. Things Isabella left behind that might explain everything." He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the shadows between the cars. I stood there for another 10 minutes, staring at the business card in my hand and the photograph on my phone screen where I'd taken a picture of his phone, unable to process what had just happened. When I finally got home to my tiny studio apartment, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled my hair up, angling my phone's camera to see the butterfly tattoo on my neck. Such a small thing, maybe an inch across. I'd always thought it was beautiful, even if I didn't understand why I had it. Now, staring at the image of Isabella's neck on Mason's phone, seeing the exact same butterfly in the exact same place, I felt like I was looking at a ghost. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. St. Catherine's Home for Children, Bridgeport. The results were sparse. A few old news articles, some charity records, a building permit from 1989. The place had officially closed in 2008, just 3 years after I escaped, citing financial difficulties, according to the records. But there were no follow-up stories, no investigations, nothing to suggest what had really happened there. Then I found a different search result, buried on the 5th page of Google. A blog post from 2014, written by someone with the username ButterflyGirl88. The post was titled, "They Marked Us." "We all had the same tattoo," the post read. "Every girl who came through St. Catherine's between 1998 and 2008. They put us under, told us it was for vaccines or medical tests. When we woke up, we had the butterfly. I didn't understand what it meant until I was older. We were merchandise. The butterfly was proof of authenticity, proof that we came from the right place, that we'd been vetted, that we were part of the inventory. If you're reading this and you have the butterfly, you're one of us. You survived. But there are people who don't want us to talk about what happened. People with money and power who made sure St. Catherine's closed quietly. People who are still out there. I'm going to find them. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did to us." The post ended there. No follow-up. No comments allowed. I searched for any other posts by ButterflyGirl88, but there was nothing. The blog had been deleted shortly after that single entry. I pulled up the photograph of Isabella again, zooming in on her face. Had she written that blog post? Had she been hunting the people responsible for St. Catherine's when she died? My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. I wanted to say thank you for agreeing to meet. Isabella would have wanted me to find you, to keep you safe. Mason. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Who killed her? The reply came within seconds. That's what I'm trying to find out, but I know it's connected to St. Catherine's, to what happened there. And I think you might be in danger too. I looked at the butterfly on my neck one more time before turning off the lights. Tomorrow, I'd meet Mason Wolfe. Tomorrow, I'd start asking the questions I'd been too afraid to ask for the last 11 years. Tomorrow, I'd find out the truth about the girl I used to be and the woman who'd died trying to expose it. I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, my nursing shift bag over one shoulder and a canister of pepper spray in my jacket pocket. Old habits. The place was exactly what I expected. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, the smell of expensive espresso drinks I couldn't normally afford. A safe, public location where nothing bad could happen. Except Mason Wolfe walked in at exactly 2 p.m., and everything about him screamed danger. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater today, more casual than the suit from last night, but somehow that made him more intimidating. Without the business armor, I could see the strength in his shoulders, the way people instinctively moved out of his path as he walked to my corner table. He carried a leather messenger bag that looked old and well-used. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. Up close, in daylight, I could see more details. A thin scar along his jawline, the way his hands moved with careful precision, the exhaustion that went deeper than just lack of sleep. This was a man who'd been living with grief for 14 months, and it showed. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "I spent half the night convinced this was some kind of trap." Smart. He flagged down a barista and ordered 2 coffees without asking what I wanted. When my expression flickered, he added, "Black, 2 sugars. That's what Isabella always ordered." I thought maybe, "That's exactly how I take it," I said quietly. Something passed between us then. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something neither of us was ready to name. The coffees arrived. Mason waited until the barista was gone before opening the messenger bag and pulling out a thick folder. Before she died, Isabella was building a case. Not for the police. She didn't trust them. She knew some of them were involved, but she was documenting everything. Names, dates, financial transactions. She was going to expose everyone connected to St. Catherine's. He spread papers across the table. I saw photocopies of old ledgers, bank statements, photographs of men in expensive suits at charity galas, and then I saw the list. Butterfly Project, I read aloud. Subject roster, 1998-2008. There were 43 names on that list. Most had been crossed out in red ink, deceased according to the notations beside them. Some had question marks. 5 had been highlighted in yellow. My breath caught when I saw one of those yellow highlighted names. Riley Fairchild, Mason said, pointing to the entry. Born April 15, 1999. Entered St. Catherine's September 2006. Last known location, Mercy General Hospital. Status, alive. Fairchild, I whispered. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Memories flooded back, a woman with blonde hair and tired eyes, calling me Riley baby before she disappeared. My mother. At least, I thought she'd been my mother. I was 7 when I went into St. Catherine's. Everything before that was fragments and shadows. Isabella's name was Isabella Fairchild before she married me, Mason continued. She thought you might be her sister. Half-sister, maybe. She found your entry in the record 6 months before she died, but by the time she located you, His voice broke. He looked away, composing himself. She ran out of time. I stared at the list, my vision blurring. 43 girls. 37 dead. The weight of it was crushing. What happened to them? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Trafficking, mostly. St. Catherine's wasn't really an orphanage. It was a processing center. Mason's voice was flat, clinical, like he'd practiced saying these words without falling apart. They'd take girls from the foster system, kids with no family, no one looking for them. They'd keep them at St. Catherine's for a few years, train them, mark them with the butterfly. Then they'd sell them. Domestic servitude, prostitution, worse. The girls who disappeared, I said, remembering. The ones they said got adopted or transferred to other facilities. They were sold. Mason pulled out another document, a ledger with dollar amounts next to names. I saw Isabella's name there, listed at age 13 with a figure that made me want to vomit. $75. Isabella escaped before the sale went through. She was supposed to go to a buyer in Montreal. Instead, she jumped out of a moving van on I-95 and ran until she hit New York. She was lucky. Most of the others weren't. I looked at my own entry. Age 15, 45, $0. I don't remember how I got out. According to Isabella's notes, you set a fire in the laundry room. Created enough chaos that you could slip away in the confusion. You made it to a bus station and ended up in Hartford. From there, you disappeared into the foster system under a different name. He smiled faintly. Isabella was impressed. She'd been looking for you for years. The fire. Yes. I remembered that now. The smell of smoke, the alarms, running through the darkness. I'd thought I was going to die that night. Instead, I'd found freedom. Why the tattoo? I asked. Why mark us? Proof of origin. A guarantee. Mason's expression darkened. The people who ran this operation were connected to major crime families across the Northeast. The butterfly meant you came from St. Catherine's, which meant you'd been properly conditioned, medically cleared, documented. It was a brand. Quality assurance for human merchandise. I felt sick. All these years I'd thought the tattoo was beautiful. A mystery from my past. Now I knew it was a mark of ownership. Proof that I'd been cattle in someone's twisted inventory system. Isabella found 5 survivors. Mason continued, pointing to the highlighted names. You, a woman named Jade Chen who's somewhere in Vancouver. 2 others who've gone completely off-grid, fake identities, no digital footprint, and one who died by suicide in 2019. Isabella was trying to contact all of you, to build a case with testimony from survivors. What happened to her? I asked. How did she die? Mason's hands clenched on the table. She was investigating a name, someone she called the director, the person who ran St. Catherine's, who organized the entire operation. She'd narrowed it down to 3 possibilities, all of them people with serious political and financial connections. Congressmen, judges, people who could make evidence disappear. He paused. 3 days before she was killed, she told me she'd figured out who it was. She had proof. She was going to meet with a federal prosecutor she thought she could trust. And she never made it to that meeting. Someone ran her car off the road on Route 9, made it look like an accident, wet pavement, sharp curve, but I found the brake line. It had been cut. His voice was raw with controlled rage. She knew she was in danger. She'd hidden copies of everything, all her research, all her evidence. She told me where to find it if anything happened to her. He pulled out a USB drive and set it on the table between us. This is everything: names, financial records, testimony from Isabella and 3 other survivors who trusted her, photographs from inside St. Catherine's, documents proving that state officials knew what was happening and covered it up. If we can find the director and get this information to the right people, we can bring down the entire network. I stared at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. Why are you telling me this? Why not just go to the police? Because half the police are on their payroll, Mason said bluntly. Because every time Isabella got close, someone tipped them off. Because the last federal prosecutor she trusted ended up dead 2 weeks after Isabella. Suicide, according to the official report. His gray eyes locked onto mine. I need someone who understands what happened. Someone who survived it. Someone who has as much reason to want justice as I do. I'm a nurse, I said. I'm not a detective or a criminal or... You're a survivor, he interrupted. You're someone who's been invisible your whole life, which means you know how to stay hidden when you need to. You're someone Isabella wanted to protect. And based on these files, you're someone who might be able to identify the director if we can narrow down the suspects. He pulled out 3 photographs. 3 men, all in their late 50s or early 60s. Victor Reeves, state congressman, chairman of the Committee on Child Welfare from 2001 to 2009. His nonprofit foundation donated $2 million to St. Catherine's over that period. Next photo. Lawrence Chen, district attorney, now a state judge. His wife served on St. Catherine's board of directors. He personally handled several cases where girls from the home were reported missing, all closed as runaways. Third photo. Marcus Webb, real estate developer. He owned the building where St. Catherine's operated. Sold it to a shell corporation 3 months before the place closed. Made $4 million profit. I studied each face, looking for recognition. And then I saw it. Him, I said, pointing to Victor Reeves. I remember him. He visited the home sometimes. They called him Uncle Victor. He'd walk through the dormitories, talk to some of the older girls. I remember he had a gold ring with a crest on it, and he smelled like cigars and expensive cologne. Mason leaned forward. Are you certain? Yes. The memory was crystallizing now, sharp and painful. He picked Isabella once. I remember because she came back to the dormitory crying. She wouldn't tell anyone what happened, but the next day, she started planning her escape. Mason's expression went cold, dangerous. Victor Reeves, current congressman for the 12th District, on the Judiciary Committee, untouchable. Not if we have proof, I said. No, Mason agreed. Not if we have proof. But getting that proof means finishing what Isabella started. It means finding the other survivors. It means getting testimony that will hold up, documentation that can't be dismissed. It means putting yourself in danger. I should have walked away. Should have taken my coffee and my normal life and left this whole nightmare behind. But I kept seeing Isabella's face in that photograph, kept thinking about the 37 dead girls on that list. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Mason exhaled slowly, something like relief crossing his features. "First, we need to find Jade Chen. She's the only other survivor besides you who might be able to identify Reeves. Isabella was trying to contact her when she died. Last known location is Vancouver, but that was over a year ago. And then we build a case that even Reeves can't make disappear. We find witnesses who will go on record. We trace the money. We prove the connection between his foundation and the trafficking operation. And we make sure everyone knows what happened at St. Catherine's." He met my eyes. "I won't lie to you, Riley. This is going to be dangerous. The people we're going after have billions of dollars and decades of power. They've killed to protect their secrets before." "They killed Isabella," I said. "Yes." I picked up the USB drive, closing my fingers around it. "Then let's make sure she didn't die for nothing." The apartment Mason brought me to wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something out of a movie. Penthouse suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, obvious wealth. Instead, it was a modest 2-bedroom in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business. "Isabella chose it," Mason explained as he unlocked the door. "After we got married, she insisted we keep this place even though we had the house in Westchester. She said we needed somewhere off the grid, somewhere no one would think to look." The interior was sparse but comfortable. Clean lines, minimal furniture, nothing personal except for one photograph on the bookshelf. Isabella and Mason on their wedding day, both of them smiling like they'd found something precious and fragile in each other. "She was beautiful," I said quietly. "She was everything." Mason's voice was rough. He turned away, busying himself with setting up a laptop on the dining table. "She was also brilliant, meticulous. Every piece of evidence in these files is documented, cross-referenced, verified. She knew she was building something that had to be bulletproof." Over the next 3 hours, we went through Isabella's research. It was more extensive than I'd imagined. Not just names and dates, but a complete map of the trafficking network that had operated through St. Catherine's and at least 7 other facilities across 5 states. The Butterfly Project, I read from one document. Initiated 1998, primary coordinator VR. I looked up. Victor Reeves. Isabella traced it back to a nonprofit he founded in 1997, Mason said, pulling up financial records on the laptop. The Foundation for Child Welfare. On paper, it's a legitimate charity that provided funding to group homes and orphanages. But if you follow the money... He clicked through several screens, showing me a complex web of transactions. It's a money laundering operation. Donations come in from legitimate businesses and philanthropists. That money gets funneled through various accounts, stripped clean, then emerges on the other side as payments to shell corporations that don't actually provide any services. And St. Catherine's received $200,000 annually from the foundation. That money was supposed to cover operational costs, staff salaries, medical care for the children. But the actual expenses were maybe $50,000 a year. The rest? He showed me another set of records, divided among 6 people. Reeves got the biggest cut, about $80,000 a year. The rest went to the director of St. Catherine's, 2 caseworkers, and 2 individuals Isabella couldn't identify. Probably handlers or buyers. I felt cold despite the warm apartment. They were stealing from a charity meant to help children while trafficking those same children. It's worse than that. Mason opened another file. The foundation received government grants. Taxpayer money was literally funding a child trafficking operation, and no one noticed because Reeves controlled the oversight committee. I stood up, needing to move, needing to process. How did Isabella figure all this out? She was careful, patient. After she escaped, she spent years rebuilding her life. Got her GED, worked her way through community college, eventually became a social worker. Mason's voice softened. She wanted to help kids like her, like you. But every time she tried to work within the system, she'd hit walls. Cases that mysteriously closed. Evidence that disappeared. She started to realize that the corruption went deeper than just St. Catherine's. That's when she started investigating on her own. She spent 5 years building this case, working her day job, then coming home and spending every evening tracking down records, interviewing survivors who'd talked to her, following money trails. He pulled up a timeline on the laptop. She found 43 girls who'd been through the Butterfly Project. 37 were dead, overdoses, suicides, accidents, or just missing and presumed dead. Of the 6 alive, 2 refused to talk to her. They were too scared or too traumatized. One is in a psychiatric facility, unable to communicate. That left you, Jade, and one other woman, Sarah Martinez, who was living in Texas under a new identity. Was? I caught the past tense. She died in a house fire 6 months ago. Electrical malfunction, according to the investigation. But Isabella didn't believe it. She thought Sarah had been silenced. Because she'd talked to Isabella. Yes. Mason's expression was grim. That's when Isabella knew she was running out of time. She started making copies of everything, hiding evidence in multiple locations. She told me if anything happened to her, I had to find the other survivors and warn them, protect them. But she died before she could warn anyone. I've been trying for 14 months, he said, but I'm not a detective. I'm not trained for this. I've been stumbling around, following Isabella's notes, trying to understand what she understood. You're the first person I've been able to actually locate and talk to. I sat back down, looking at the photograph of Isabella again. We'd been in St. Catherine's at the same time. We had the same tattoo. We might have been sisters. And she'd died trying to save people like me. Tell me about Jade Chen, I said. If she's still alive, she's in danger too. Mason pulled up a file. Jade was at St. Catherine's from 2002 to 2006. She was sold when she was 14 to a man in Toronto. Managed to escape 2 years later. Isabella tracked her to Vancouver in 2022. She was working under the table, staying off-grid. Isabella made contact, tried to convince her to come forward, but Jade refused. Too scared. Can you blame her? No. He rubbed his face tiredly. Isabella's last note about Jade was from March 2024. She said Jade had agreed to meet, to talk about maybe providing testimony. They were supposed to meet the week after Isabella died. So Jade might not even know Isabella's dead. Probably not, and if she does, she's probably terrified. She might have run again, gone even deeper underground. I studied Jade's photograph, an Asian woman with short dark hair and wary eyes, taken from what looked like a distance. Surveillance photo, maybe. We need to find her. If Reeves knows about Isabella's investigation, he might know about the survivors she contacted. Jade could be a target. That's what I've been thinking, Mason said. But Vancouver's a big city, and if Jade doesn't want to be found, we have to try. I stood up. Isabella died for this. Sarah Martinez died for this. I'm not going to let Jade be next. Mason looked at me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You sound like her. Isabella. She had that same determination. Maybe it runs in the family, I said quietly. Over the next 2 days, Mason and I worked around the clock. I called in sick to the hospital, the first time I'd missed a shift in 2 years, and immersed myself in Isabella's files. Mason used his connections to track down current information on Jade. It turned out that having mob connections, even if you were trying to go legitimate, meant you had access to information networks most people didn't. Found her, Mason said on the third morning. Or at least I found someone who matches her description. Working at a restaurant in Vancouver's Chinatown district. Goes by Jenny Wang now. You're sure it's her? He showed me security footage from the restaurant, taken from a street camera. The woman walking into the building matched Jade's build and general appearance. As sure as I can be without direct confirmation. Then we need to go to Vancouver. That's a 12-hour drive or a 5-hour flight. Either way, we're talking about crossing into Canada, which means what? I asked, reading his hesitation. I have a record, Riley. Minor stuff, charges that didn't stick, but enough that border crossing can be complicated for me. I can do it, but it raises flags. Takes time. Then we drive. Take back roads if we have to. I was surprised by my own certainty. If Jade's in danger, we don't have time to waste. Mason studied me, and I saw something like respect in his eyes. You're sure about this? Once we leave, once we start actively pursuing this, there's no going back. Reeves has resources, if he finds out what we're doing. He killed Isabella, I interrupted. He destroyed lives. He's probably still doing it, just with more care now. I won't let him get away with it. Okay then. Mason closed the laptop. We leave tonight. Pack light. Bring whatever you need, but assume we might not be coming back here for a while. I went back to my apartment to pack. As I stuffed clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. The butterfly tattoo was visible where my hair had fallen forward. I pulled it aside, really looking at it for the first time in years. 43 girls marked with this symbol. 37 dead. Isabella had been trying to give meaning to that mark, to transform it from a brand of ownership into a symbol of survival and resistance. Now it was my turn to finish what she'd started. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions. Stop digging. Walk away now and you'll live. Keep going and you'll end up like Isabella Wolf. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. They knew. Somehow they already knew what we were doing. I forwarded the message to Mason, then typed back to the unknown number. I'm not walking away. See you soon. Then I turned off my phone, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. If they were watching, if they were threatening, that meant we were getting close. That meant Isabella had been right, and the evidence she'd gathered was dangerous enough to kill for. I met Mason at the apartment an hour later. His expression was grim when he saw me. You got a message too? I asked. He nodded, showing me his phone. The text was identical to mine. They're trying to scare us off, I said. They're going to try to kill us, Mason corrected. That's not a warning. That's a promise. They're just giving us a chance to run first. Then we don't give them time to follow through. I threw my bag in the back of his car, a nondescript sedan, not the luxury vehicle I'd expected. We find Jade. We get her testimony. We put together something so airtight that even Reeves can't make it disappear. And we do it fast, before they have a chance to clean up their tracks. Mason started the car. As we pulled onto the highway heading north, I turned to look back at the city lights fading behind us. Somewhere back there, Victor Reeves was sitting in his comfortable office, or his expensive home, confident that his secrets were still safe. He was wrong. Isabella had left us a roadmap. Now we just had to follow it all the way to the end, no matter where it led or what it cost. Tell me something, I said as we merged onto I-95. When you found out what happened to Isabella, when you realized she was killed because of this investigation, why didn't you just go after Reeves yourself? Why not use your connections, your resources to make him disappear? Mason was quiet for a long moment. Because that's not what she would have wanted. Isabella believed in justice, in exposing the truth so that people could be held accountable publicly. She wanted the world to know what happened. She wanted those 37 dead girls to be remembered, not just avenged. He glanced at me. I wanted to kill him. I still want to kill him. But I'm trying to honor her memory by finishing this the right way. And if the right way doesn't work? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Then we'll deal with that when the time comes. We drove through the night, taking turns at the wheel, stopping only for gas and coffee. By the time we crossed into Canada through a small border checkpoint in Maine, dawn was breaking over the eastern horizon. Vancouver was still 8 hours away. 8 hours to plan. 8 hours to prepare. 8 hours before we walked into whatever trap might be waiting for us. We arrived in Vancouver on a gray afternoon, the city wrapped in mist that rolled in from the Pacific. Mason had booked us a hotel room in Chinatown, one room with 2 beds, both because it was safer to stay together and because we were running low on the cash he'd brought. Credit cards left trails, and we couldn't risk anyone tracking our movements. The restaurant where Jade worked was called Lucky Dragon, wedged between a dim sum shop and a convenience store with signs in Mandarin and Cantonese. Through the window, we could see it was busy with the dinner crowd, mostly locals, from what I could tell. We should wait until her shift ends, Mason said. Approaching her in public might spook her. We don't know when her shift ends. Could be hours. Then we wait hours. He settled into the driver's seat. If she runs because we rushed this, we might never find her again. He was right, but waiting felt impossible when every instinct screamed that we were running out of time. The threatening texts had stopped, which somehow felt worse than receiving them. Silence meant planning. It meant whoever wanted us gone was being strategic about it. I watched the restaurant window, trying to catch glimpses of the servers. Most were older women, moving efficiently between tables. Then I saw her, younger than the others, maybe early 30s, with short black hair and quick movements. She was taking orders at a corner table, her posture tense, like someone ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "That's her," I said. Mason followed my gaze. "You're sure? Look at her neck. When she turns. There." For just a second, as Jade reached across the table to collect menus, I saw it. The butterfly. Smaller than mine and Isabella's, partially hidden by her collar, but unmistakably the same design. "Okay," Mason said quietly. We wait for her shift to end. Then we approach her carefully. Let her know who we are, why we're here. Give her a chance to hear us out. We waited 3 hours. The dinner crowd thinned, then disappeared entirely. At 9:47 p.m., Jade emerged from the restaurant's back entrance, now wearing jeans and a jacket, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She moved quickly, head down, hands in her pockets. "Now," Mason said. We got out of the car and followed her down the street, keeping our distance. She turned into an alley, a shortcut maybe, or a defensive maneuver to see if anyone was following. Mason and I exchanged a look. This wasn't going to be easy. "Jade," I called out, keeping my voice gentle but clear. "Jade Chen, we're not here to hurt you. We just need to talk." She spun around, and I saw her hand emerge from her pocket, gripping what looked like a knife. Her eyes were wide, terrified, calculating escape routes even as she faced us. "My name isn't Jade," she said, her accent faintly Canadian, the words clipped. "You've got the wrong person." "Jenny Wang," Mason said. "That's what you're going by now, but you were Jade Chen at St. Catherine's Home for Children in Bridgeport. You were there from 2002 to 2006. "I don't know what you're talking about," but her hand was shaking on the knife. I stepped forward slowly, pulling my hair up to expose my neck. "The butterfly, Jade. We have them too. All of us from St. Catherine's. All the girls they marked." Her eyes locked on my tattoo, and I saw something crack in her expression. Fear, yes, but also recognition. Relief, maybe, at not being alone. "Who are you?" she whispered. My name is Riley Fairchild, though I went by Riley Morgan after I escaped. I was at St. Catherine's the same time as you." I gestured to Mason. "This is Mason Wolfe. He was married to Isabella Fairchild." At Isabella's name, Jade's knife hand dropped slightly. "Isabella? The woman who contacted me last year?" "Yes," Mason said. "She was trying to build a case against the people who ran St. Catherine's. She died before she could finish it. We're trying to complete her work." "She's dead." Jade's voice broke. "How?" "Murdered," I said bluntly. "Made to look like an accident. Because she got too close to exposing the truth." Jade lowered the knife completely now, leaning back against the alley wall. She looked exhausted, years of fear and survival etched into her features. I knew it was dangerous. When she contacted me, when she told me what she was doing, I knew something would happen to her. That's why I said no. That's why I stayed hidden. "We're not asking you to go public," Mason said. "Not yet. But we need information. Isabella's files have gaps. Things only survivors would know. Details that could help us prove what happened. And if I help you?" Jade's eyes were hard. "What then? They'll come after me like they came after Isabella. Like they probably came after Sarah." "You know about Sarah?" I asked. "I saw the news. House fire in Dallas. Electrical malfunction." Jade laughed bitterly. "I knew what it really was. That's when I changed my name again, moved apartments, stopped using any connection to my old life. I've been waiting for them to find me ever since." "They will, eventually," Mason said. "If Victor Reeves knows Isabella was in contact with you, he'll keep looking. Your only chance at real safety is helping us take him down first." "Victor Reeves." Jade spat the name like poison. "He's the one who picked me, the one who arranged my sale. I remember his face, his voice, the way he talked about us like we were livestock being graded for market." "Then help us," I said. "Help us make sure he can't do this to anyone else." Jade studied us both for a long moment. Then she pocketed her knife and pulled out a cigarette, lighting it with shaking hands. "I live 3 blocks from here, small apartment. It's not much, but it's private. We can talk there." Jade's apartment was exactly as she'd described, tiny, sparsely furnished, with locks on every window, and a baseball bat propped beside the door. The walls were bare, except for a single photograph of what looked like a younger Jade with an older woman, both smiling. "My grandmother," Jade said, seeing me look at it. "The only family I had before St. Catherine's. She died when I was 9. That's how I ended up in the system." She made tea, jasmine, fragrant and calming, and we sat around her small kitchen table. Mason pulled out a notebook and recorder, but Jade shook her head at the recorder. "No recordings. Nothing that could be used to identify me if it falls into the wrong hands. I'll tell you what I know, but I won't have my voice on tape." "Fair enough," Mason said, putting the recorder away. For the next 2 hours, Jade told us her story. Some of it matched what I remembered, the locked dormitories, the medical examinations that were really just pretexts for marking us with the tattoo, the visitors who would walk through and evaluate us like they were shopping. But Jade had been older when she arrived at St. Catherine's. She'd understood more, seen more. "There were 3 main buyers," she said. "Domestic buyers who wanted girls for housework and nannying, sometimes legitimate families who treated you decently if you were lucky. International buyers who were trafficking girls overseas, and the specialists." "Specialists?" I asked. "Men with specific requirements, certain ages, certain looks. They paid more. Victor Reeves was a specialist. He liked girls between 13 and 15, brunette, quiet. He'd take them to a house upstate for weekends. Some of them came back, some didn't." Mason's jaw clenched. "Isabella went with him once." "I remember," Jade said quietly. She came back different. Harder. That's when she started planning her escape. She tried to convince me to go with her, but I was too scared. I thought I'd be safer staying, being compliant, waiting for a good buyer. She laughed bitterly. Instead, I got sold to a man in Toronto who locked me in his basement for 2 years. How did you escape? I asked. House fire. Ironic, given what happened to Sarah. But that one was real. Electrical problem in the old wiring. I got out through a basement window while he was trying to save his computers and files. Ran until I hit the border. Talked my way across by claiming I was a Canadian citizen separated from my family. Made it to Vancouver and stayed invisible ever since. Do you remember any other names? Mason asked. Anyone besides Reeves who was involved in running St. Catharines or arranging the sales? Jade nodded slowly. There was a woman, Linda something. She worked as the director's assistant, but really she was the one who handled the logistics, matching girls to buyers, arranging transportation, managing the money. She was efficient, cold. I remember she wore expensive jewelry and drove a BMW. She didn't live like someone making a social worker's salary. Linda Moreau, Mason said, checking his notes. Isabella had her name in the files but couldn't track her down after St. Catharines closed. She probably retired somewhere nice with all the money she made selling children, Jade said harshly. People like that don't face consequences. They just disappear into comfortable lives while we're left picking up the pieces. Not if we can help it, I said. If we can find Linda Moreau, she might be willing to testify in exchange for immunity. She'd have detailed knowledge of the operation, bank accounts, buyer networks, everyone involved. She'd never talk, Jade said. She's too smart. She knows talking means dying. Maybe, Mason said. But Isabella found a way to pressure people. She traced Linda's finances, found discrepancies that could be evidence of tax evasion or money laundering. If we can pick up where Isabella left off. A sound outside the window made us all freeze. Footsteps in the alley. Slow, deliberate. Jade moved silently to the window, peeking through the blinds. Car parked across the street, she whispered. Dark sedan. 2 men inside. They've been sitting there for the last 5 minutes. Mason was on his feet immediately. Back door? Fire escape. Leads to the alley behind the building. Then we use it. Now. We moved quickly, grabbing our things. Jade paused only to snatch the photograph of her grandmother from the wall. I'm not leaving this behind again. The fire escape was old and creaky, but we made it down without alerting whoever was watching the front. The alley was dark, lit only by a distant streetlight. Mason led the way, moving with the kind of awareness that came from years of knowing when trouble was close. How did they find us? I asked. Could be surveillance on Jade, Mason said. Could be they tracked us from the border. Could be someone at the hotel recognized me. Does it matter? He was right. It didn't matter how. What mattered was getting somewhere safe, figuring out our next move. We made it back to the hotel through back streets and alleys, always checking behind us. The room appeared undisturbed, but Mason insisted we pack and leave immediately. Where do we go? Jade asked. If they found me in Vancouver, they can find me anywhere. Not anywhere, Mason said. I have a place. A cabin in upstate New York near the Canadian border. Isabella and I used to go there. It's registered under a shell company. No obvious connection to either of us. Off-grid. No one knows about it except... He paused. Except Isabella. And she's gone. Then that's where we go, I said. We regroup there, go through all the evidence, figure out how to bring this whole thing crashing down on Reeves and everyone else. We left Vancouver that night, driving back across the border at a different checkpoint, using back roads and small towns where surveillance was lighter. Jade sat in the back seat, quiet but alert, occasionally checking out the rear window. "Thank you," she said after hours of silence. "For not giving up. For finishing what Isabella started. I spent so long just trying to survive that I forgot about fighting back." "We all did," I said. "But Isabella reminded us. And now we're going to make sure her death meant something." The cabin appeared just before dawn, a small structure surrounded by pine trees, isolated and perfect. We'd made it. For now, we were safe. But the real work was just beginning. The cabin was cold when we arrived, frost clinging to the windows and wood floors that creaked with every step. Mason got a fire going while Jade and I unloaded supplies from the car. We'd stopped at a small grocery store an hour south, paying cash, trying not to look like exactly what we were. 3 people running from something dark and dangerous. "Isabella loved this place," Mason said, feeding logs into the stone fireplace. "She said it reminded her that there were still spaces in the world where the past couldn't find you." "Except it did find her," Jade said quietly. "Yeah." Mason's voice was rough. "It did." We spent the first day settling in and recovering from the drive. The cabin had 2 bedrooms. Mason took one, and Jade and I shared the other. That night, lying in the darkness listening to Jade's breathing steady into sleep, I found myself thinking about Isabella, the woman I'd maybe been sisters with, who died trying to save people like us. I touched the butterfly on my neck, feeling the slight raised texture of the old tattoo. The next morning, we started working in earnest. Mason spread Isabella's files across the dining table. Physical copies, because he didn't trust digital storage anymore. Bank records, photographs, testimony notes, financial statements. Years of meticulous investigation laid out in paper and ink. "We need to organize this into something presentable," Mason said. "Something that tells a clear story from beginning to end. Right now, it's comprehensive, but scattered." "Start with the money," I suggested. "Follow the financial trail from Victor Reeves' foundation through St. Catherine's to the buyers. Money is concrete, harder to dispute than testimony." Jade picked up a ledger. "I recognize some of these amounts. $45 no, 75 no dollars. Those were the prices. I saw Linda Moreau reviewing these exact numbers when she was matching us with buyers." "Can you identify which girls were sold for which amounts?" Mason asked. "Some of them, yes." I paid attention. I thought maybe if I understood how the system worked, I could find a way to escape it. We worked through the day, creating a timeline. The Butterfly Project had started in 1998 with 6 girls. By 2008, when St. Catherine's closed, 43 girls had been processed through the system. Isabella had documented the fate of 37 of them, dead, most within 5 years of leaving St. Catherine's. Overdoses, accidents, suicides, missing persons cases that were never solved. "They were disposing of evidence," Jade said, her voice flat. "Anyone who might talk, who might expose the operation. They made sure we didn't survive long enough to become a problem." "But 6 of you did survive," Mason said. "You, Riley, Isabella, Sarah, and 2 others who went completely off-grid. Isabella couldn't find the last 2. She only had partial names, Emma and Sophia. No last names, no locations." "I remember Emma," Jade said suddenly. "Emma Reeves." The room went silent. "Reeves?" I repeated. "His daughter," Jade said. "Or at least, that's what Linda Moreau told us. She came to St. Catherine's when she was 16, stayed for 6 months. We thought it was strange. Why would a congressman's daughter be in a place like that? But Linda said Emma had gotten in trouble, and her father wanted her somewhere controlled, somewhere she could be watched." Mason was already pulling up information on his laptop. "Victor Reeves has 1 daughter, Emma Reeves, age 31, lives in Boston, works as a graphic designer. No criminal record, no obvious connection to St. Catherine's." She wasn't like us, Jade continued. She didn't have the butterfly tattoo. She wasn't being sold. But she saw things. She knew what was happening there. I remember she tried to help some of the girls, sneak them food, pass messages. Her father found out and pulled her out early. So she's a potential witness, I said. Someone who can testify about what her father was doing. If she's willing to betray her own father, Mason said, that's asking a lot. She might not have a choice, Jade said. If she has a conscience at all, she's been living with what she knew for 15 years. Sometimes people break under that kind of weight. Over the next 3 days, we built our case. Mason used his connections, the legitimate ones, lawyers and investigators who owed him favors, to start pulling together legal frameworks, how to present evidence of child trafficking, how to build a RICO case that could implicate everyone involved, how to ensure our testimony would be protected. I focused on the human story, organizing the testimonies of survivors Isabella had collected. Each one was heartbreaking. Each one was proof. Jade worked on identifying buyers and handlers, creating a network map that showed how St. Catherine's connected to a broader trafficking operation across the northeastern United States and into Canada. On the 4th day, Mason made a decision. We need to contact Emma Reeves, he said. If she's willing to cooperate, her testimony could be the breakthrough we need. A congressman's daughter confirming her father's involvement in child trafficking. That's something the media can't ignore. Something prosecutors can't dismiss. And if she warns her father? Jade asked. Then we'll know where she stands and we'll find another way. I volunteered to make contact. A woman reaching out might seem less threatening than Mason. We found Emma's business email through her design portfolio website. I spent hours drafting the message, trying to find the right balance between honesty and caution. Ms. Reeves, my name is Riley Fairchild. I don't expect you to remember me, but we were both at St. Catherine's Home for Children in 2006. I was 12. You were 16. I'm writing because I'm trying to understand what happened there. I've learned things that suggest St. Catherine's was not what it appeared to be. I believe you may have witnessed some of the same things I did. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want the truth. If you're willing to talk, please respond to this email. I promise confidentiality and respect. Riley. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came 18 hours later. Riley, I remember you. I remember all of you. The girls with the butterflies. Yes, I'll talk. But not over email, and not anywhere my father might be watching. There's a coffee shop in Cambridge near MIT. The Science Cafe on Mass Ave. Can you be there Friday at 2 p.m.? I have information you need. Information my father doesn't know I kept. Emma. Friday was 2 days away. We used the time to prepare, to rehearse questions, to steel ourselves for whatever Emma might reveal. Mason insisted on coming with me, though we agreed he'd sit separately, watching, ready to intervene if things went wrong. The drive to Cambridge took 4 hours. We arrived early, scouted the location, confirmed exit routes. The Science Cafe was perfect, busy enough that we'd blend in, open enough that threats would be visible. Emma walked in at exactly 2 p.m. She looked nothing like her father, petite, blonde, with an artist's style and watchful eyes that probably saw more than people realized. She spotted me immediately, something in her expression confirming she knew exactly who I was. Riley, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. You look different, older, but the eyes are the same, scared but determined. You remember me? I remember everyone from that place. She ordered coffee when the waiter came, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. I've been waiting 15 years for someone to ask me about St. Catherine's. I knew eventually the truth would come out. Your father is a monster, she said flatly. I've known since I was 16. Probably should have known before that. But sometimes you don't want to see what's right in front of you. Why were you at St. Catherine's? Punishment. Emma's smile was bitter. I found out what he was doing. I hacked his computer, found files about the foundation, about the girls. I was stupid. I confronted him, threatened to go to the police. He sent me to St. Catherine's to teach me a lesson, to show me what happened to girls who didn't stay quiet. Did it work? For a while. I was terrified. I saw what they did to you and the others. I knew if I talked, I'd end up like that. Or worse. She paused. But before he pulled me out, I copied files. Everything I could find on his computer, on Linda Moreau's computer, on the director's computer. I've had them for 15 years, hidden in encrypted storage, waiting for the right moment to use them. My heart was pounding. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I was a coward, Emma said simply. Because he's my father, and despite everything, some part of me kept hoping I was wrong about him. Because I knew what it would cost me, my family, my reputation, maybe my life. But then I saw Isabella Wolf's obituary 14 months ago. I knew who she was. I knew she'd been at St. Catherine's. I knew her death wasn't an accident. You think your father killed her? I know he did. Because 2 weeks before she died, I got an anonymous email asking if I'd be willing to provide testimony about St. Catherine's. I was too afraid to respond. And then she was dead. Emma's voice cracked. I've been living with that guilt ever since, knowing that if I'd been braver, if I'd spoken up, she might still be alive. You can speak up now, I said. We're building a case. We have evidence, testimony, financial records, but we need someone who can connect it directly to your father, someone whose testimony can't be dismissed. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. Everything's on here. 15 years of files, communications between my father and buyers, financial records from the foundation, videos from his personal files that prove he knew exactly what St. Catherine's was and what it was being used for. She pushed the drive across the table. I'll testify. I'll go on record. I'll do whatever you need. Just promise me you'll bring him down. All of them. Everyone who was involved. I closed my fingers around the USB drive. I promise. There's something else you should know, Emma said. My father has been looking for survivors. He hired investigators to track down anyone who might have testimony about St. Catherine's. That's probably how he found Isabella. And that's definitely how he'll find you if you're not careful. We're being careful. Not careful enough if I could track you down. She slid a piece of paper across the table. That's a secure email. If you need to contact me, use that. Don't use my business email again. And watch your backs. My father has connections in law enforcement, in politics, in organized crime. He won't go down without a fight. She stood up, leaving her coffee untouched. I hope you finish what Isabella started, Riley. Those girls deserve justice. We all do. Then she was gone, disappearing into the Cambridge afternoon. I sat there for another 5 minutes, the USB drive burning in my pocket, before Mason appeared beside me. You got it? He asked. Everything, I said. Emma Reeves just handed us everything we need to destroy her father. We drove back to the cabin in charged silence, the USB drive sitting between us like a promise and a threat. Back at the cabin, Jade was waiting, tension radiating from her as she paced the small living room. Did she show? Jade asked the moment we walked in. She showed, I said, holding up the drive. And she brought everything. We spent that evening going through Emma's files. It was worse than anything Isabella had documented. Video footage of Victor Reeves at St. Catherine's, walking through dormitories, selecting girls. Emails discussing prices and preferences with buyers whose names we recognized. Business leaders, politicians, wealthy socialites. Financial records showing millions of dollars flowing through the foundation into offshore accounts. "This is enough," Mason said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "This is enough to put him away for life. If we can get it to the right people," Jade added. "If we can find prosecutors who aren't on his payroll." Mason pulled out his phone. "I know someone, federal prosecutor in New York, Olivia Chen. She's clean, ambitious, and she's been trying to take down corruption in child welfare systems for years. Isabella was going to contact her before." He stopped. "Before she was killed," I finished. "Yes." Mason was already dialing. "Olivia and I have history. She'll take my call." He stepped outside to talk. Through the window, I watched him pace, gesturing, his body language urgent. When he came back 15 minutes later, his expression was cautiously hopeful. "She'll meet with us," he said. "Tomorrow, her office in Manhattan. She wants to see everything. Emma's files, Isabella's research, testimony from both of you. If it's as solid as I told her, she'll convene a grand jury within a week." That night, none of us slept. We organized everything into a presentation, a complete narrative of the Butterfly Project from 1998 to now. We prepared our testimonies. We rehearsed questions and answers. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You're making a mistake. Last chance to walk away. VR, Victor Reeves." Using his own initials, not even trying to hide anymore. He knew what we were doing. He knew where this was heading. I showed the text to Mason and Jade. "He's desperate," Mason said. "That's good. Desperate people make mistakes. Or desperate people do desperate things," Jade countered, "like kill witnesses before they can testify." "Then we move fast," I said. "We get this evidence to Olivia Chen tomorrow, and we make sure it goes public immediately. Once it's out there, killing us won't help him. The story will be bigger than us." We left for Manhattan before dawn, taking routes we hadn't used before, constantly checking mirrors, watching for tails. The drive took 6 hours. Mason's connection, Olivia Chen, had arranged for us to enter through a secure entrance, bypassing the main federal building entrance. She was younger than I expected, early 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of intensity that suggested she didn't tolerate nonsense. Her office was professional but sparse, decorated with law degrees and commendations. "Mason," she said, shaking his hand formally. "I was sorry to hear about Isabella. She was doing important work." "She died because of that work," Mason said. "These are the people who are finishing it. Riley Fairchild and Jade Chen, both survivors of St. Catherine's." Olivia's expression softened slightly as she looked at us. "Thank you for coming forward. I know this can't be easy." For the next 4 hours, we walked her through everything: the financial records, the testimony, the videos from Emma's files. Olivia's face grew progressively darker as she absorbed the evidence. "This is RICO," she said finally. "Racketeering, human trafficking, money laundering, murder. You're looking at federal charges that could bring down not just Reeves, but everyone connected to this operation." She paused. "The challenge is going to be protecting you. Once we move on this, Reeves will know who provided the evidence. You'll need witness protection." "I don't want protection," I said. "I want justice. I want people to know what happened. I want those 37 girls who died to be remembered." "You'll have both," Olivia said. "But you need to stay alive to see it. Let me worry about keeping you safe. You worry about being ready to testify." She made calls while we waited. To other federal prosecutors. To FBI agents who specialized in organized crime and trafficking. To media contacts who could ensure the story broke widely and quickly. By the time we left her office that evening, the machinery of justice was in motion. Grand jury subpoenas would be issued within 48 hours. Arrest warrants were being prepared. A press conference was scheduled for the following week. "What about Emma?" I asked Mason, as we drove to a safe house the FBI had arranged. She's exposed now, too. Olivia's people are picking her up tonight, Mason said. She'll be in protective custody until this is over. The safe house was a brownstone in Brooklyn, guarded by federal agents, secure. We stayed there for 3 days while prosecutors built their case. On the morning of the 4th day, news broke. Federal prosecutors charge Congressman Victor Reeves in decades-long child trafficking conspiracy. The story was everywhere. Front page of the New York Times. Lead story on every news channel. The evidence was too overwhelming to ignore, too documented to dismiss. Photos of Reeves being led from his home in handcuffs. Footage of FBI agents raiding the offices of his foundation. Within hours, more arrests followed. Linda Moreau was picked up at the airport trying to flee to Mexico. 3 state officials who'd been on St. Catherine's board. 2 buyers whose names appeared in the financial records. A police captain who'd covered up missing persons reports. The network was collapsing. On the 5th day, Mason got a call from Olivia Chen. "We found her," she said simply. "Found who?" "Sophia Martinez, one of the missing survivors from Isabella's list." She saw the news coverage and came forward. She's been living in Texas under a different name. She wants to add her testimony to the case. One more voice. One more survivor stepping out of the shadows. The trial began 6 months later. Federal courthouse in Manhattan, maximum security. I testified on the 3rd day, Jade on the 4th, Emma Reeves on the 5th, walking into that courtroom and looking her father in the eye as she described everything he'd done. Victor Reeves showed no emotion. He sat at the defense table, flanked by expensive lawyers, maintaining his innocence. But the evidence was insurmountable. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later, sentencing. Victor Reeves received life without parole. Linda Moreau, 25 years. The state officials, 10 to 15 years each. The buyers, various sentences based on their involvement. Justice. Finally. After the sentencing, Mason, Jade, Emma, and I stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters and cameras. "This is for Isabella," Mason said into the microphones. "For Isabella Fairchild Wolf, who died trying to expose this conspiracy. For the 37 girls who didn't survive. For every child who was trafficked through St. Catherine's and the other facilities. This is their justice." That night, we gathered at the cabin one last time. Mason brought champagne, though none of us felt much like celebrating. We were too exhausted, too hollowed out by months of testimony and trauma. "What now?" Jade asked. "Now we live," I said. "We build the lives they tried to take from us." "Isabella would want that," Mason added. "She spent years trying to survive, then more years trying to help others survive. She'd want us to do more than just survive, though. She'd want us to thrive." Emma raised her glass. "To Isabella. And to the Butterfly Project, not their project, but ours. A network of survivors who refused to stay silent." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months, I felt something like hope. In the weeks that followed, we went our separate ways but stayed connected. Jade returned to Vancouver but started the process of getting her life back. Real identity, proper documentation, therapy. Emma started a nonprofit providing legal services to trafficking survivors. Mason sold his house in Westchester and donated the proceeds to fund Emma's organization. And me? I went back to nursing, but I also started speaking publicly about St. Catherine's, about trafficking, about survival. I kept my butterfly tattoo visible now, wearing my hair up, letting people see the mark that had once branded me as merchandise. Now it was a symbol of survival, of resistance. 6 months after the trial, Mason called me. "I've been thinking," he said. "Isabella kept journals. Did I ever tell you that? She wrote everything down. Her thoughts, her dreams, her plans. I've been reading through them, and I found something. An entry from 2 weeks before she died. What did it say? She wrote about finding you, about discovering that her little sister from St. Catherine's was alive, working as a nurse, building a good life. She wrote that finding you gave her hope that all the work she was doing mattered, that if you could survive and thrive, then maybe there was a purpose to everything she'd been through. My throat tightened. I wish I'd known her. You did, in a way. You were connected. By the butterfly, by St. Catherine's, by survival. He paused. She also wrote that she wanted to make sure you stayed safe. That if anything happened to her, she hoped someone would find you and warn you and protect you. You did that, I said. You finished what she started. We finished it, Mason corrected. All of us together. That's what Isabella would have wanted. A year later, we held a memorial. All the survivors who were willing and able to attend gathered in a small park in Bridgeport, not far from where St. Catherine's had once stood. The building had been demolished, replaced by affordable housing, a better use of cursed ground. We planted 43 trees in a circle, one for each girl who'd been part of the Butterfly Project. 37 had plaques with names for those who died. 6 were living memorials for those of us who survived. Mason planted Isabella's tree, a Japanese maple that would bloom red every spring. I planted my own tree next to hers, a monarch oak, because Isabella had once written in her journals that she wanted to be remembered like the butterfly we all carried, beautiful, transformative, free. As we stood in that circle of trees, survivors and allies and families, I touched the butterfly on my neck one last time. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't carry shame or fear. It carried memory, yes, but also pride. We were the Butterfly Project, not their project, but ours. The ones who survived. The ones who fought back. The ones who made sure the world knew what had happened. And we would never be silent again. Mason came to stand beside me, both of us looking at Isabella's tree. Thank you, he said quietly, for finishing this, for giving her death meaning. Thank you for not giving up, I replied, for believing her, for believing us. He took my hand, and we stood there together, two people bound by loss and justice and something that was starting to feel like hope for the future. The butterfly had marked us, but it didn't define us. We defined ourselves.